Okay, nice. Wonderful. Wonderful. Here we are. Wow, great opportunity. Uh, yeah. So I'm very excited to be continuing with you with the Haggadah. Last time was very, very important for us to discover that if you remember, we are reading these verses that are announced by a person bringing those first fruits to of the land, and that how much this is a reflection of the whole process which has been going on of a discovery of identity, which Abraham asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to evoke really in his children, in saying to God, after he's told you will bequeath, give over the inheritance of the land. So he says, Bama Idaki Rashena, which we understood to mean with what type of awareness, what type of knowledge, what type of consciousness will it take for this land to be passed on? I mean, after all, I needed to go through so much leaving behind to get here. I needed to go through so much of a transformation. I myself am such a particular type of human being that's on a quest and in a dynamic movement towards discovering. And like, in what sense will this truly be an inheritance to children who just kind of get it on a silver platter? You know, God says, you're right. This needs a certain level of consciousness. This whole reality of inheriting the land, because the truth is, this land needs itself people who are indeed an outgrowth of an authentic path in living. And that requires the kind of freedom we've been talking about. That requires the kind of spontaneity, creativity, freshness that we've been talking about. That requires a real, um, contact with the inner um, drives that are that are true to the nature of creation, not drives that are ego-based or needs-based or survival-based drives, but drives that are really about creation itself, which is initiated with the divine drive to bring forth life. Will they be participating in that, in the fulfillment of life, in the enhancement of life, in the affirmation of life? Like, and that requires body, that requires mind, it requires spirit, and it requires challenges, because it's by virtue of challenges, certainly in the world which is post eating from the tree of good and evil, but seems to be pretty embedded from the very beginning. As if you remember the very, very beginning, I recited to you how the rabbis say that the tohu vavo v'choshech al pnei tehom, that the chaos and the nothingness and the darkness that's on the depths, those are the four exiles that the Jewish people will go through, meaning that even before anything happens in human history, creation is itself the result of order over chaos, but where the chaos remains embedded in the order and needs to be interacted with. And then it becomes also, I don't think it was there at the beginning, but in choosing good and evil, which is the choice of the eating from the tree, then it also becomes that interaction is between good and evil, not just between chaos and order. And so Abraham sees what he got himself into. Oh boy. Just like in the Garden of Eden, they asked for knowledge. I also asked for knowledge. How will I know? Okay, you'll get knowledge, but understand the painful process that is the kind of knowledge that you're seeking, of a truth of identity, not just going with the flow, being with things as they are, but discovering the point of purpose that stands behind that, the identity which is lying underneath it. And what's going on around here? Let me take care of that. This needs a man. What's going on? Will it be comfortable for you, ladies, if we can make it like colder, but make the wind. Oh, that's as low as it goes, huh?
Yeah.
I see why this has been making so much noise. Okay, it is what it is, but I'm fine with that, but I don't know if that's a consensus. Is that a I mean, is that, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so much better for me personally. Let's open the windows and enjoy the fresh air. So, yeah, so you see this, like, this is what we're in, okay? This is what we're in. And what we pointed out last time, right, is that in bringing first fruits and reciting our history is just such a beautiful interaction between the freshness and newness of, so to speak, the spontaneous and the creative and the current, like being present to what is and being interacting with that. That's the first fruits. Wow, first fruits. That's the feel that it has, right? It's like not like, oh, we're done. Finally, we're finished. No, we're just beginning. What do you mean just beginning? You have the fruit. That's the end. Yeah, but now that we have the fruit, we can keep growing. It's like this feeling like that on the one hand, and on the other hand, the person bringing it recites this whole long history, right? Of like, well, where we started with someone who actually tried to uproot everything using the metaphor of growth. He tried to uproot things. That person, in this we explored in depth, that person from Arami, which is Ramai, the trickster, the deceiver, sought to uproot knowledge from its being moored, its being anchored in reality, and played with people's minds. He tried to uproot everything from its being moored in reality. Okay, that was the point that we saw about how dangerous this Lavan is. And not only how dangerous he is to being able to see truth, but without truth, there's actually no meaning. Without some access of some sense that, like, what I'm doing is connected to something, it can't be meaningful. And without it being meaningful, freedom itself, in the true sense of freedom, becomes severely in question. Because, I mean, if you can't really choose because you don't really know what's out there, so then you can't really be free, because to be free is to be able to exert your powers of choice and choose that which to you recognize as being the most meaningful to, and now you're going to have to connect to values somehow, to the flourishing of life, to the exaltation of love, to the realization of creative powers, to all the things which God embedded this world with as its most imminent values. If I'm a trickster and I can make it into anything, then when I make my choices, they're not really connected to anything except my own spontaneously generated ideas about things, or the way I feel right now, or this is what I want to do. And this is like, but that's not the kind of freedom we're talking about. That's like a liberation from everything, but it becomes to the point where you're just like alone, completely alone, completely on your own. And that is exactly what God says is the only thing that is not good, is to be alone. And that has many, many, many repercussions. We're talking about one right now. Many repercussions, but like, and then you get into this, because human beings are designed to be connected to meaning and purpose and values. So then what happens is when you get these deceivers using media, using their mouths to deceive you and to trick you into uh, losing touch with things as they are, then because you're designed to be connected up, you start looking for what to be connected up to. And then the road is very short to fascism, to despotism, to finding the strong leader who he knows, right? He knows. And then you give yourself over and your life over to that because you're so alone and so weak and so nothing in the face of the universe. And so you see how deception and the loss of contact with what's real is the road down. It looks like it's the road down to liberation. Well, then I can think whatever I want. But it ends up becoming the road to enslavement and to the deterioration of the value of freedom itself. I mean, if nothing really makes any difference, then okay, so that this is again, I'm just like I keep jamming on the same thing about Lavan, and because I think it's so pertinent to nowadays, and freedom, truly freedom, is at risk in the supposedly democratic free West. It's really at risk, and the risk is derivative of all the Lavans out there lying and deceiving and causing people to lose faith in the very possibility of coming into contact with what's actual, right? And it's a very short. I mean, look at the failures going on in current democracies. It's really it's painful. It's painful. It's painful, including Israel. It's painful, but it's a byproduct of a world which has lost contact with the most imminent, basic realities that are values that are embedded in the nature of creation, of the fulfillment of life, of its growth, of its achieving its creative realization as reflections of the divine impulse, those primal and primary values, right? Which, yeah, which are lost to us as as we lose contact with what is real. So this is the true danger of Lavan, and this is why this person bringing these first fruits starts from the person who wanted to uproot the fruit, the product from what brought it about, uproot the mouth from what is real, uproot action from the nature of the person doing it, uproot the poetry from the reality of the poet who's writing those poems, right? And uproot our awareness from connection with the organic, basal realness of the stuff of the earth, right? So here I am, man, he says to the Kohen, I'm bringing these fruits of freshness, fruits of innovation, but let me tell you the history of how they came about so you have a very clear idea that I don't bring that innovation as a disconnect from everything that has been, but rather as a fulfillment of what has been. It's an amazing moment in the Torah. It really is. It's the only place in the Torah where the person is obligated to describe the history of the Jewish people at that moment. Well, wait a minute, there's another moment like that. Seder night, the Haggadah. So you see how perfect a selection this is, that these would be the verses which would become the centerpiece of the Haggadah. Okay, that's what is important for us to recognize. So the chapter 26, 25 of Deuteronomy becomes weirdly the story we tell. Oh boy, it is, because it carries with it all of this. Okay, amazing. So this is where we had gotten to last time. And now we're actually going to go into what happens in the really the rest of the Haggadah, which is taking apart word by word the statement which is made by this person bringing the first fruits. That's what's going to happen now, right? It's the fulfillment of the command which is brought in the Mishnah, V'doresh me'arami overavi. You make a drasha from the beginning of the statement that's made by the person bringing the bikurim, from those words arami overavi. Okay? The first drasha is arami overavi, that bikesh la'akor et hakol, Lavan bikesh la'akor et hakol. That's kind of the first drasha on this. The Aramean who tried to destroy me, that was Lavan. That's what we've been jamming on for the last two sessions, I think. I don't know. I don't remember. Okay, now, were there any questions about that presentation that I just gave? It's like, we're ready to move on? I think we're ready to move on. Great. Then the next words are Vayered Mitzrayma. You can see them there, like he went down to Egypt. It was Jacob who was almost destroyed by Lavan, and he went down to Egypt. Jacob did, right? And you guys have it? You see where it is in the text? You want to help? Mercedes, can you help that woman next to you? You see it, right? Vayered Mitzrayma. Let me just see if this thing is working. Okay. Vayered Mitzrayma. Okay. Vayagor Sham Bimte Ma'at. We didn't do this last time, right?
No.
Great. Vayagor Sham Bimte Ma'at, and he sojourned there. Maybe that's how it's translated. He dwelled there, he sojourned there. But he was a very few people. And this is now going to become super important to the Haggadah. Very few people came with him. Okay, I mean, I guess that matters. Vayisham, and they became there a Goy Gadol Atzum Varav, a very great nation, great in the sense as we're going to see, a large nation, Atzum, very, very large and powerful, Varav, and really, really large. Okay, I mean, I guess you mean large. I mean, like, what are these three words here that are so important? Gadol, Atzum, Varav. So those of you who do have um, a Chumash, open up to the very beginning of Shmot. And even if you don't have a Chumash, just listen. This theme of starting small and getting big is super important in the beginning of Shmot. That's like the theme at the beginning of Exodus. Okay, so put that aside, just have that open there, and let's go back inside to the Haggadah, because we're going to now go through word by word. So now we go. Vayered Mitzrayim. So he went down to Egypt. Seems pretty straightforward. Well, think about it. Was that Yaakov's personal choice to go down to Egypt? Did he choose to go to Egypt? You remember the story. I mean, Yosef gets sold and he's in mourning, and then there's the famine, and Yosef, in the meantime, has become the provider of the entire planet. And then Yaakov, his children go there to get food, and the whole plot that is so complex that ends up bringing Yaakov down to Egypt. So you look at that, and to the uninformed reader, it looks like a whole bunch of circumstances which led to Yaakov going down to Egypt. But to the informed reader, who remembers chapter 14 from Bereshit, when God spoke to Abraham, saying, they will go down to a land which is not theirs, and they will be servants there, and they will be afflicted there, etc. To the informed reader, it's like, it's a done deal. Something's going to happen. We don't know what. That's going to end up bringing them to Egypt, right? And what happens is all of those circumstances, which seem like a real story, and it is a real story, but it's a real story on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's actually the playing out of something which was predetermined that must occur. What are you going to do? God said it will be, and so it is. So, Vayered Mitzrayim, lest you get the impression this is something which was freely chosen of his own agency. Anus al pi hadibur is the next words of Haggadah. He was forced by the word being what God had spoken to Avram. He was forced by it. He is compelled. There's compulsion here. He was forced not by circumstances. He was forced by the plan. which is to achieve knowledge. Okay, Avram, you asked for it, it's going to happen. Okay, it's going to happen. And the whole story of Yosef and his brothers is actually a reflection of the plot, which is to get him down there. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't have its own teachings and value, etc. Life is kind of like that, like there's certain things which just need to work themselves out. And I can tell you from my perch, which is about, 30 years more than most of yours, is like you like start looking back, and I actually do work like this with people, and it's very, very important to see you start looking back and say, that was that was really important that that happened. I mean, I don't think I would have actually become the most of what I could become if it hadn't been that I met that person, that I was in that trying situation, that person defamed me, that she spoke to me so insultingly, that lecture I gave failed, that was a big success, that I was invited to just at the right moment teach at Beirut. I mean, like, you look back from a perch of after time, and it's like it's not a proof, because it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing, because obviously you are where you are by virtue of the things you went through. But oftentimes, late at night, you might look at that and say, it really seems I am where I am meant to be, and that I needed to learn all kinds of things on the way to get there. And I couldn't have skipped those because then I wouldn't be where I am mentally, spiritually, emotionally, if I hadn't gone through those things. So it's not like, oh, why didn't God just put me and plump me down where I needed to be at the end of the game? That would be the fruit without any of the realization and reality of it. There would be no dot in that. There would be no fullness of knowledge and consciousness in that, right? So, but yeah, it's like you do get the feeling sometimes. I hope you also sometimes have that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like this was this was meant to teach me something. And again, it's not to in any way demean the events which occurred as if, nobody was choosing anything. Everyone was choosing what they were choosing. Everyone was in their reality, and so were you. And yet there was something here that was being worked out. On a certain level, not that difference than the embryo growing in the mother's womb towards where it needs to be. And yes, no, what are you talking about? It's very different. I made real choices there. I had to work hard. That's not what are you talking about? It's not like, and I think that dialogue is a healthy dialogue, and it's an important dialogue. And it's important not to give yourself up to, well, we'll just let things unfold as they unfold. No, 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 you don't understand. The way things are meant to unfold has a lot to do with your input and your responsiveness and your understanding, and you're facing those challenges and you're being challenged. So if you go with the flow, you're not going to end up where you're supposed to be. You're paddling up the stream. It's like hopefully with the flow, but nevertheless, you are directing that. And these are mysteries which are beyond our acumen, really, because of the nature of our consciousness itself, which is so partial. But it's important to understand that we're all on a certain level anus al pi adibur. That's what I wanted to say. We're all on a certain level compelled by the divine voice that desires our greatest fulfillment and greatest good, right? And so, yeah, so like it's really important to sort of recognize that the freedom that we are, so to speak, working out, it's not even so to speak, that we're working out and working towards, has at its foundation a certain compulsion to it, right? And we all know that. I mean, like you're born a certain way with certain talents, certain skills, certain parents, certain reality. I mean, so you're already in a compelled situation on the one hand. On the other hand, the creative interaction that you have with that is very much yours. On the other hand, that you, which is having that creative interaction with it, is also in a way a given by God to who made you a certain way to have those interactions. And as we said, there are certain real and eternal values that are embedded in the nature of creation itself. I mean, why do we seek love? Why do we seek companionship? Why do we seek um, righteousness, virtue? I mean, what is all that about? You know. So there's a compulsion in it. Okay, that's what I want to point out. And in a sense, without that narrow straits of the, could call them in a different language of physics, say the boundary conditions of the universe, the laws of nature, in a less heady term. It's like without that there wouldn't be anything. Imagine yourself without gravity. So you're going to be compelled by gravity or not? I'm going to ignore gravity. I'm going out that window, babe, and I'm flying. You know, uh, I hope someone will hold me back. It's like, but like, this is real stuff, this interaction. And so it's so amazing to me. Oh, so perfect. Forget the amazing, it's an Americanism. It's so perfect that the that the Anus al Pi Dibur starts the process of becoming enslaved. Yeah, you are enslaved from the very beginning. Even before you're enslaved, or at least you're compelled. Okay, that's I think that's the interesting thing that the Haggadah really wants us to connect to right now. There's no such thing as this full liberation that you might be orienting yourself towards. You are living, and not only that, right? Not only that, by virtue of those settings that have been placed in place, you're able to really have that creative interaction. As we've explored so much, I want us to we've explored these concepts in the past, but you see, like here it is, Anus al Pi Dibur. You've got to understand that Yaakov did not go there by choice. Why do we have to understand that Yaakov didn't go there by choice? Why? You understand this is part of telling the story, which is the story of this person bringing the fresh first fruits that are rooted in the ground. They came from somewhere. They have a certain reality that's their givens, and yet they're bringing them to the Kohn that's in that day, as we talked last time, not yesterday's Kohn. Cool. And so, therefore, that's the first statement. Okay? Vayerid Mitzrayim. See what a drush is? How you guys doing? Is anyone melting? Okay? Good, thank you. Anus al Pi Dibur, which is not really, the Haggadah doesn't tell you which Dibur, I'm telling you which Dibur. Next, Vayagor Sham. He dwelled there. He sojourned there. Milamed. Now here this comes to teach you using that word, right? Vayagor, which is not Vayeshev. For instance, Vayeshev would have meant like to really sit there, to sit in it, right? To sink into it, right? As we're about to see, they're going to use that word, to sink into it. No, it's not. It's Vayagor. A ger, as some of you know, a ger initially is someone who is, so to speak, a stranger, right? It becomes much more than that, but obviously, but that transitional phase, right? Ger, is it's temporary. It's temporary, okay? And it is temporary. Also in the life of a ger, it's temporary. When it shifts into an actual absorption into and sinking into, is it in the lifetime of the ger? Is it in the children of the ger? Is it, you know, those are things to explore, certainly, in this context and in any context. But here, I'm not going to go into that. I think though that's an important exploration. But here, the Haggadah is pointing out that word vayagar, is that melamed shelo yarad Yaakov Avinu lishtakeh b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov did not go down there in order to sink into that place as his permanent dwelling place. Ella lagur sham, shene'emar, and he even uses the word vayomru el paro the children of Yaakov, when they meet Pharaoh the first time, we're jumping back and forth between Genesis now and where we are hanging out primarily in Deuteronomy, right, in Dvarim. שנאמר ויאמרו אל פרעה לגור בארץ בנו כי אין מרעה לצאן אשר לעבדיך כי כבד הרעב בארץ כנען ועתה ישבו נא עבדיך בארץ גושן. Okay, so they say lagur ba'aretz banu, we came to dwell in your land, and it's a temporary situation. It's just because right now there's no pastures for our flocks, and there's a very, very heavy famine in the land of Canaan. So let us dwell, your servants dwell in Eretz Goshen, in the land of Goshen. Okay, that's a whole story of its own, and as you've come to know me, it's challenging for me to move on, but I'll just say this in brief here. I think this is a really interesting and important point. And let's take it back to ourselves. It's like the things we're forced to go through by virtue of the compulsion of our lives and of lives in general and of life in general can be very tempting to just sink into it and stay there in the morass. It's like, let's just put it like this. I'm just dealing now with a couple, and she's like still at the stage. With God's help, she'll leave that stage. It's just the way I am. It's just the way I am. I get angry. It's just the way I am. And it's true that is just the way she is. It's also true that there's a tremendous power in her anger, which when it becomes transformed into commitment, conviction, for the fullness of the other, and not just the other as an annoyance, et cetera, et cetera. So that just the way you are will become a tremendous, tremendous power. I can already see it. He loves her passion. He loves her passion, but he pays a heavy price, too heavy. He's ready to leave already because the price is so heavy. I mean, it gets violent. No one wants to live with that kind of, that kind of anger. But many men want to live with that kind of passion. Okay. And the anger comes from, it also runs through not only a history, family history, but also it runs through all kinds of things. This is just who I am. So that's called lishtakea. That's called to settle down there. I'm just going to settle down into being an angry person. I'm settling in to the anusa piyadibur. I'm settling into the givens of my compulsion. That's just the way I am. Can't you hold that? No. It's like, okay, now what? Okay, this is really important because Yaakov Avinu, on the one hand, is aware, maybe he's not even aware, I don't know, that he has been compelled. On the other hand, when you go where you are, even when you are compelled to be there, never choose to stay there. This is a passageway, a narrow strait. A narrow strait in Mitzrayim is indeed the narrow strait. It's one, I'm trapped. Well, some people start to like it. I like that constraint. I like the way I am. Let other people just accept it, or that's just the way I am. Yeah, no. Right? Vayagorsha. Freedom is achieved by the awareness of the constraint and the acceptance of the givens and the creative chosen fulfillment or movement towards a higher realization. You see that how profoundly the Haggadah is presenting us with this dynamic, right, between those two parts. Okay, so on the one hand, anus al pi hadibur. Okay, well, it's as they call maktub. in Arabic, So I don't really know Arabic, but it's like it's just my fate. Well, it is your fate to go through Egypt, but it's not your fate to stay there. And like, yeah, it's like I want to say a little more about this because it's something that I faced for years and really had to like I like the natural. I like the natural. Say, hey, when I'm feeling down, I'm feeling down. That's just the way it is. Okay. Oh, feeling angry, feeling angry. That's just the way it is. It's real. It's real, right? It's real. At least it's real. Now, when I start, yeah, but there's another side to this. You could look at it this way and then probably be less angry and less sad. You know, I know, but that feels fake, right? That feels fake. I don't know if you suffer from this, but I suffered from this because I'm an intellectual, so I'm also, as intellectuals ought to be, suspicious of my intellect. It's like, I know my brain can take me all kinds of places. So it's like, is that real? Is that real? You know what I mean? It's like, is that real when I am now conducting myself by virtue of the thoughts I'm thinking? Or maybe like, yeah, maybe I'll feel better, but it'll be less real. This is very tricky stuff, because very tricky stuff. And so I just want to point that out that like why someone would actually choose Lishtakeasha. It's not necessarily a negative thing. It's like it's because of a drive for truth. So it only became more alive to me that changing myself into the person I aspire towards being is truthful. that and that requires getting in touch with my ideals, my desires, the things that I value. Well, do you value joy? Yeah. So that's real for you then, joy. Okay. So is it dishonest, self-deception to now do things that will bring you greater joy when you're not feeling like it right now? I'm not feeling happy right now. Okay. I mean, who said your feelings are the entire description of your reality? There are other parts to your reality, like your values, your desires, your aspirations. I mean, there's like all kinds of stuff. That is it real for you to be happy? Yeah, it is real. I feel very real, and I often do with people when I'm like, therapeutically. It's like, tell me all the like really bad stuff about you. Like all the negative things you think about yourself. I'm, I'm like, I'm weak and I'm a pushover. Yeah. Okay, great. Right. Now, tell me some good things about you. It's hard for me to find. Well, tell me about some good things that you're really wanting for yourself. Oh, wow, I can talk about those. Yeah, like I really want to be loving. I want to be connected. I want to be alive. I want to be real. I want to be creative. I want to be spontaneous. Amazing, man. Let's write that down. Okay, now let's look at this page, okay? Now I want you to I'm going to close your eyes and I'm going to read to you those negative things you said. And then I'm going to read to you those positive things. And I want you to tell me rating from 1 to 10 when it feels more real to you. And unless the person is like super really in trouble, right, which will have its own, pathology and method, almost always people say, "Ah, this, yeah, yeah, that's me, man. Like I'm yearning for love. I'm yearning for attachment. I'm yearning for like grandeur. I'm amazing. That feels much more real to me than I'm weak. Those are like, yeah, those are like ways I'm being right now, but that's not really me. Those are really, really significant distinctions, right, that a person makes. And it turns out, and here's the beautiful thing, and we're going to see how much the Haggadah plays this out. It turns out that the deeper compulsion is those higher values and aspirations. And the circumstances of which become now, you start to look at them as circumstances of my feeling powerless and being angry, etc. those are actually sort of like circumstances of my life, even though they're not external, they're internal, but they're internal circumstances of my life, which are not the actuality of who I am. They're like the circumstances which are there to clarify with me where the depths of my being are. You see how that, and it's so easy. And I wanted to give you like a credos to explain why people might lishtakesha. I'm just going to dwell in that in a nice way because it feels real. I feel like, and I really do. I always look at people with a positive view. You know what I mean? Like she's staying angry and staying depressed, and she's got both because it's real. It feels very real. And until you put a person in touch with the more primary and primal values and aspirations they have, they don't know anything else. They don't know anything else. Mercedes, thank you. I think that's enough. You can go back. Actually, sorry, the guy who runs my YouTube said, "You don't have any pictures of you." And so I asked Mercedes to help out on that. Okay. But I wasn't posing. I really wasn't. That's why she waited until like I was into it. But okay, but yeah, you see that? It's like until you get in touch with that, until you get in touch with the, so to speak, the deeper compulsions of life, which are the innate and imminent drives of the divine, right? So you don't make that distinction. You think that if I'm feeling down, that's just the reality. Now it's not to say again. Now I just want to make one other little point, but it's an important one. Sometimes you do actually need to be there and to dwell in Egypt. Uh, You can't push it out. Okay, you can't push it out. And I want to be like totally fair and real about that. They have to be there 210 years. That's a long time. So like it's not like you can, oh, let's just think positively about it. I'm not going to be like plastic about it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, let's just think positively. Sometimes it's extremely fruitful to go through a period of vacuousness. Really, if it doesn't become like pathological, it's just like it's okay. It's okay to be down. It's okay. And I often do that with people. So that's okay. That's okay. You need really to pass through that. That's okay. But when it becomes your dwelling place, I don't say that to them at that point, but I say to you, that's when it becomes a problem. He goes to Egypt. He goes to Egypt and he's willing to live in Egypt. And they even say, Goshen, we're going to live in this place called Goshen. And here's one of the most magnificent things which is built into the Torah. Goshen, Gosh, Gash, Gush. It means to touch. It's the place of being in touch. Like Vayigash, to come close and to touch. Vayigash, the parsha, which introduces the land of Goshen, is actually called Vayigash. And it starts with Yehuda coming up really close to Yosef to try to protect Binyamin, remember, to get him out of the jail. Vayigash. Goshen is an important word. It's an important for them place to be. You've got to be willing to be in touch with it where you are, right? That's what I wanted to point out. And so, indeed, Vayagor Sham, but Vayagor Sham, you will dwell there. And you need to dwell in those places. You really do. And you need to go through that. And I have nothing negative to say about this woman, being angry. She needed to dwell in that. And she apparently needed also to see where it's going to take her and her family, and like, and my prayer and working with them is that she'd be able to get in touch with the authenticity of the resources which lead to that anger, but in which they become part of a life that's flourishing and that's filled with love and filled with et cetera, et cetera. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, and then she can leave that Egypt, but without ever leaving behind the fact that we were there. It comes along not just as a historical memory, it's built now into the personhood, right? So here he is with the first fruits, It's new. I'm with the Kohen who's in these days, right? I'm here with this newness. Yeah. And I'm telling the story of us having been in Egypt. Why do we need to know that? Why talk about all that bad stuff? Just forget about it, put it away. No, I'm made of that. I'm built of that. Okay. But I'm also built of the fact that my forefather went there to to, to dwell, but not to sojourn, but not to dwell. Now, okay, that's second stage. And now, and it's so tied together, and I'm glad we have time. And now we go on another couple of words, which I think are such a amazing teaching. Forget amazing. What's happening to me? Okay. Bimte Ma'at. He went down to Egypt, very small number of people. Shivim Nefesh, right? There was 70. That's it. That was the entire Jewish people was 70 people. You know, they went down there, 70 people, Bimte Ma'at, right? Which is a poetic way to talk about very few people, right? Kamash and Emar. Well, maybe we'll get back to that phrase shortly. Kamash and Emar. B'shivim nefesh yardu avotecha mitzrayim. There were 70 people who went down to Egypt. Ve'ata samcha Adonai Elohecha ve'ashamayim nabo. Okay, this is something which is spoken by Moshe much later, but he also makes a point of saying how few we were when we went down to Egypt, the Metema'at. Okay, now this is interesting and worthy of noting uh, that the middle letter of the word Ma'at is actually 70. Ayin is the gematria of 70. So you have like the Matmat, you know, it's like there was uh, well, mate means like mate ma'at means a small amount, a small number. It's not so clear the etymology of that using that word mate because a mate is a dead person. So that puts a little bit of a macabre to it, like what's going on here exactly. And as we're going to see, I believe that the distinction being made, we're about to discover, right? But let's just stay with it right now that they went down with a small number of people. We might get back to the number 70 and why that's elemental here. But for now, I want to go someplace else with you. And Moshe, at the end of his life, says to them, you went down just 70 people and you've become now a nation as numerous as the stars. Okay? Let's keep going because I want to make a more general point and then maybe we'll come back and look at this more next time. Vayihisham legoy. And then they were there and they became a goy. A goy is a nation, right? Milamed shayu Yisrael mitsuyanim sham, meaning that they didn't assimilate into the Egyptian culture. They remained mitsuyanim, which means identifiable. Their identities were not polluted. Okay? And the rabbis have all kinds of midrashim. They kept their names. They continued to call themselves by Hebrew names, and etc., etc. Okay, but the point is that even though they were there, they maintained clarity of identity. Next stopping point, gadol atzum. Here's kind of where I'd like to go with you now. Gadol atzum. These two words, which mean big and very big, kemash Emar, as it says at the beginning of Shemot. This is why I had us open Shemot earlier on. Uvnei Yisrael. It says that the Jewish people, or the Israelites, paru, they were fruitful, vayishrutzu, and they swarmed. Like swarmed. Yeah, a sheretz is actually like swarming creatures. Vayishrutzu, vayirbu, and they were really, really numerous. Vayatzmu, and they were super numerous. V'me'od, really, me'od, really, really, like very, very. I mean, like I think I get the idea. Vatimale haaretz otam, and the whole place was filled with them. I mean, these people are like swarming. It's like vermin. It's like the worst anti-Semitic tropes. It's like they're all over the place. And if you look at the beginning of Shemot, we're not going to read it now, but if you look at the beginning of Shemot, that first chapter is like all about that. The Egyptian king, like he's like, this is what freaks him out. Vayakom Melech Hadash is a new king, and he says, "Oh my gosh, the Israelites have become really, really big. We better be super smart with them, lest they even get even more numerous." I mean, like, why is this so important? And why is this actually the contrast that the Chumash is setting up? Now, understand, right? We're going to go a little thematic here, right? It's like the Chumash is setting up a contrast between a despot, who he's kind of becoming more and more despotic as he sees these people getting more and more uh, numerous. That's interesting. I mean, the enslavement comes by virtue of us having been numerous. There is an antithesis being set up here between numerousness and enslavery on some level. And I'll tell you that, there's a Medrash, which perhaps I hope, where we're told that in the merit of the righteous women, we actually were redeemed from Egypt, which is a beautiful phrase. But let me tell you the rest of the story, and that is that the men would come home completely um, tired. Okay, we'll leave it at tired. They were just like exhausted. They were, but not only tired and exhausted, but as we're going to see in a moment, they were also without hope, despairing. And the women would like fish them out some fish and take these mirrors, and then they would like pretty themselves up, and they'd hold the mirror, which is a very interesting thing, which maybe we'll explore more next time. They'd hold the mirror and say to him, "I'm prettier than you are." And he'd say, "No, I'm actually quite handsome." And then she'd say, "No, but I'm more beautiful." He'd say, "No, actually, I'm really quite good looking." Until they actually notice each other here, and they would make babies. So it's like, um, and this hang on, and this is actually the righteousness of the women who saved us, got us out of Egypt. I mean, it's not their righteousness that they were very tzniistic, or that they didn't speak lashon hara, or that those are not what the rabbis are interested in. And this power that they had to insist on life continuing to grow. And notice that this is what the rabbi set up again as the antithesis. Will we remain, and I'm conceptualizing a little, will we remain committed to life and its growth and expansiveness? Affirmation of being more and more? Or will we surrender to those who seek to contain us in the narrow straits? What is your most primal experience, right? What is the most primal drive? So this is presented at the very beginning of the book of Shemot, and that's important. It's important, and so important that in another story the rabbis tell, where Miriam, the daughter of Amram, right, and Yocheved, Amram, it says he split from Yocheved. He split. Do we need this? We're okay? Amram split. I know you're sweating, so am I. Doesn't matter. Amram split from Yocheved because he said, I mean, like, why should we have children? They're going to be thrown into the river, right? That was what Paro was doing, throwing all the boys into the river, throwing all the boys into the river. So then Miriam says, I mean, you actually are doing something worse than him. It's true, he throws the boys into the river, but you're actually preventing the girls from coming into life. Why are you so male focused? Yeah, really. And he accepted her admonition. So it's this drive. And it also has to do with the feminine. It definitely has to do with the feminine. Clearly, we're seeing that. And in fact, it's quite interesting. If you look through that first chapter, you'll see it's almost like anonymous. There's like no real names. There's a person who went from the house of Levi into a woman who was, we know their names. It's Amram and Yocheved, tell us their names. Even there where it says Shifra and Pua, those aren't their real names. That was actually Miriam and Yocheved. Look through the chapter there and you'll see the daughter of Pharaoh went down, right? And the worst of all, and there was a young boy who was born, and they put him into a little box by the riverside. Wait a minute. Where the heck did we ever see someone born in the Bible and his name was called? Is there anyone else in the Bible who's born, certainly of importance, who doesn't immediately follow with, and his name was called? Isn't that strange? I think it's super precise. And here's the idea. Names are a secondary reality. The drive for life and its flourishing is the primary reality. As soon as I give something a name, I have given it a particular identity, and from there, I'll just move up a little notch, a particular idea, a particular ideology, a particular credos, particular paradigm, particular belief, and we're like, where's life exactly? What happened to life? Names are actually, I mean, not anti-name, but first thing God says when he creates the creatures who can do this, even before there's human beings, is he says, Pru urvu milu haaretz. And my gosh, that's exactly what the verse said. The earth is to be filled with teeming life, teeming life. That's God's first command. I love life. Talk to me later about religion, mitzvot, ideologies, liberation, justice. We'll get there, man. But let's get in touch with teeming life. And this is super important because true freedom cannot become an idea and an ideology when if it's disconnected from that most primal and basal drive for life. I love life. I love life. That's what it is. I adore life. I affirm life. Whatever words you want to use, okay? These are like so elemental, right? And unfortunately it became soiled with a kind of a misuse of like Darwinian evolution or whatever. It's like, yeah, that drive, it's all about survival. It's not all about survival, okay? It's not a cold universe in which everything is antithetical to life and we got to just survive. It's dark out there, right? You could look at it that way. That's not the way the Torah looks at it. The Torah looks at it exactly the opposite. It's not a survival instinct. It's a creative instinct. It's a warm universe. It's a passionate universe. It's a universe which is teeming with life because the maker of it loves life. The universe itself loves life. Every niche and cranny that you can find, it's crazy, the forms of life. They're still finding different types of forms of life because we never got deep enough in the ocean or deep enough into a cave where there's no oxygen to discover there's like, oh my gosh, well, that is insane that it would be able to survive in these. Boy, look at the power of the desire for survival. So negative and cold. No, look at the desire of the universe to more and more and more and more. I mean, is there anything more visceral about this world than that? Everything else is add-ons. One thing we can all say for sure. somehow this planet seems to really like life because it's in every possible format, just, style. I mean, man, I was just like, you know, I don't always completely concentrate when I'm davening, and sometimes I open my eyes. And there was this incredible long-legged spider climbing up the wall and like right below where I pray in shul, like, "Ah, what? Like, what?" And I guess I just became completely like taken by really long legs, thin, but so supple and subtle and so capable. I mean, he has a much smaller brain than I do, but he can do many things that I cannot. I mean, where the heck is that? Where the heck is that intelligence coming from? He's clearly. I mean, this is part of my whole other set of ideas about things, which perhaps at some point I'll share with you. But like, clearly, the guy is like a radio receiver from some high intelligence because there isn't enough gene material in there to be conducting the incredibly complex things that this long-legged thing is doing right now, climbing up the wall. But that's another subject. I don't care about that one as much right now as to recognize, like, every place you look, man, that's unbelievable. You know how many bacteria there are in this cup? Now you understand why I'm not drinking it? It's like, I know how many bacteria there are in every breath you take, and it's like, it's teeming with life. That now understand this, right? It's a passionate reality that we live. If you in that we are compelled by, okay, you get the compulsion thing. This is the most primal value when you talk about values of our universe, right? So, oh my gosh, you're going to talk about freedom without being in touch with that, everything I just described? Free for what? Free to live. Do you care about life? Do you value life? Of course I do. So the primal value really is your love of life. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, well, I'm going to take you through some horrific narrow straits in which you're going to be back in touch with that. And you men who have all the ideas and all the names for things, you're really important. Don't worry. We'll get there. We'll get to Matan Torah. We'll get where we need to get to with the male stuff. But you can't begin the process towards freedom unless you're first in touch with the feminine, simple, basic, basal drive of life and its adoration. So the Haggadah really wants to put us in touch with that. Here, we went down a small group, but boy, did we ever grow under the worst circumstances. Adarabah, as it says, Kasher Yanu Oto, Ken Yirbe v'Chen Yifrotz. The more they afflicted them, the more they impoverished them. Better translation. The more they stripped them down, even better translation, of any hope, any beliefs, any systems, any ideologies. The more they stripped them down, and the more they believed when we get rid of all of those men with all those ideas and all those, the more we'll be able to control them and dominate them. The more they just kept growing. Oh my gosh! The more stripped down they became, the more they're being enamored with life came more powerfully forth. You see that? I'm just like, yeah, freedom starts there. And now I'm glad we're at the end of the class to read something which is so wild. The final word we're going to see today, which is virav. Okay, vayisham legoy gadol atzum, right? Varav, teeming with life. Now the last word varav means like pru urvu, be very, be very much, be very much. Okay, right? I mean, what else could we say? I mean, the earth is already teeming with them, right? What else could Rav mean? Okay, I'm going to read the verse now. As it says, Varav Kamashin Emar, as it says in Yechezkel. There's this incredible passage in Yechezkel, Ezekiel, where he says, like, wow, I found you an infant, bloodied with the birth blood, and I diapered you, and I coddled you, and then you grew. Now, this is where we start reading the verse. And you were so matured, like the plant of the field I have made you. Vatirbi, rivava, vatirbi, and you matured, and you got larger, and you came to me decorated with jewelry. Your breasts were exact, your hair flourished and had grown, and you were naked and exposed.
What's this talking about now?
Just relax. It's talking about what it sounds like it's talking about. I mean, it's talking about what it sounds like it's talking about. It's talking about God watching the Jewish people grow. Let's relax. It's all a metaphor, don't worry. It's talking about the Jewish people having grown into a beautiful woman. But there's no question that the choice of the metaphor means something. Obviously, God is describing a passion for this beautiful woman, and he's describing a beautiful woman. The uh, the interpretations have it also that the beauty of the decorations of the jewelry she had were the very breasts that themselves had become full. So it's like we're clearly talking about something very impassioned here, right? So impassioned that it's embarrassing to be doing this right now, right? And at the Seder, like, like most people just kind of run through this verse. It's like next. It's like, but it is what it says, and it says it for very real reasons, because lest you think that all of that fertility and all of that reproduction and all of that was just about survival. Let me tell you something. It was about passion. It was about love. It was about God's love for this people, because this people itself loves life. And in the same way that those women, did not surrender to the hopelessness and the loss of faith of their husbands, who were in the ideas, and well, it's not working out, but rather, well, there's still life to give. Just as they aroused their husbands' passions, the Jewish people arouses God's passions to continue to invest life pulsing through creation, through this people that is the expression of that love of life. Yeah, that's a way to start going into enslavement and discovering the very, very nascent beginnings of the freedom in that productivity and that passion, impassioned commitment to love, to connection, to creation, to filling this earth with teeming life. That's it. Questions?
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Ooh,
Thank you
somebody
for the
there.
class. Thank you.
You're
Enjoy
welcome.
it. Okay.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. So,
I'm sorry.
so who wrote that like poetic description of the Jews being running
Ezekiel, the prophet.
because like that
But it's all over the place, the Song of
mammary
Songs of
gland
Shlomo.
part,
I'm sorry?
um,
Who?
the mammary gland description just doesn't feel very godly. It feels like a
The
human.
what doesn't? The what?
The description, throwing in the description of the mammary glands.
Breasts?
Yes.
Is something dirty about the word breast? Okay, anyhow, That description doesn't seem very godly. I'm so glad you're saying that.
It feels very human. Like
Oh, it is. It
the
is
rest of
indeed.
it seems like it could just be a poetic thing to describe in a way that humans understand, but that other description sounds like it's
I'm so glad you're saying that
why?
because I think it's really important to expose that, like, sort of like jarring juxtaposition between something which is so physical and clearly like like seductive and
Yeah, just
erotic
feels like, yeah, but
with
maybe we
God. I
may
mean,
have
like,
just
is
added
God
those.
like, what does God have to do with erotics?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just talk it out, And I think it's really, I think it's great you're asking that question, and I want to say something about that. And that is that we are in the image of God. So that we participate in erotic activity is not some like sort of byproduct. It is reflected, it is reflecting something which is in the divine. And the rabbis have no qualms about saying that God had a passion to create this world. You had a passion. Okay, now wait just one second. I'm with you. Let me just, I see the like, but yes, when a human being describes passion, it's erotic. Okay, so now that's not a dirty thing. That's not a negative thing in the Western Christian world, especially became like dirty. It's not dirty. It's actually the purest. And in fact, the Holy of Holies is the Song of Songs, which if you read that one, this is like nothing compared to that. I mean, like they're just frolicking all over the place, right? And the descriptions are extremely, um, what's the word? Graphic. Thank you. Extremely graphic. Okay. So, and you wonder, like, how did this become the Holy of Holies? I mean, I thought that was the most ethereal and disembodied reality. And no, 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 no. What you're experiencing through your body is actually a modality of divine reality. Okay. And even when it's that kind of sexual passion, right? Now, obviously, it can not be that, right? Obviously, lusting can take you to an opposite place, but conscious um, integration, it's not even integration, unity, means that, yeah, we can talk about God this way, right? That's what the prophet does. This is the word of God. It's like we can't do better than the word of God because we have other ideas about God. No, 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 no. King Solomon and Ezekiel and other places also. So what do we do with that? I think we do something like I've been describing, like God really is impassioned about us because we are the way through which this desire, and it's best to call it like a desire, this like appetite, this desire like travels through into the embodied creation which he has made. Yeah. So
Okay.
and your next question.
Um, would it be possible to make a question maybe for the answer next class?
Because
Your
this is the
time.
voice of the
You
time is
finished.
up.
I don't know, it's Shalva. Hi.
Okay. Why is that? Because I have to stop because of another class? Or, who
Yes,
are you?
no, because I think I don't want to take up
Oh,
your
you're the
time.
teacher. Because no, I'm fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
There's the drive to multiply.
The class is over. Anyone who needs to leave, yeah, for sure. And it's all recorded, and you can hear the question and answer. We'll have one more question.
Just curious, the drive to multiply and to become fruitful applies to a lot of enslaved nations. Even nowadays, the more nations are enslaved, the bigger these nations become, and then once nations become wealthy, they stop to have a high birth rate. So I'm curious, what's the difference between the Jewish people's drive for freedom and their chosenness versus other nations that have the same drive?
See, it's so interesting, because like I think in the what is it called, the OED? Is that the European Union thing?
Mhm.
OED, something like that. Among the industrialized advanced nations, right? Israel, I think, has the highest birth rate. And that is like so, like that, what you just described didn't happen to us. Take a look at Italy, Germany, France, Spain. Like, take a look at them. As you say, the more, because the more, um, well, what happens is there's two ways to go. When you become more wealthy, you can become much more self-involved and like, I want my life to be like really comfortable, really, etc. Which is also a kind of a life affirmation, but it's not really an affirmation of life. It's an affirmation of me, which isn't really deriving from an affirmation of life. So as you become more into you, because you have so many means, you can become more self-enclosed, or you can become more generous, sharing, and desiring to produce more life, right? And yeah, that's very, very interesting. I believe I'm quite positive that's statistically correct, and I'm interested if someone knows otherwise. But like, that's like, whew, we're a very like advanced country, and it's not just the sort of the lower strata of Israeli society that has families. In Israel, like having a family is like a really, that's a big deal, you know? Like, and people stay into it. It's still probably, you know, there's definitely, well, it's not definitely, that's not true. You can have like very wealthy, advanced, and, you know, smart people with large families. It's something you find much, much less around the world. So that's an interesting reflection of this same typology. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, trying to put what you're teaching now in today's situation. Will you be able to, in other class, if you can answer, what was the inner gasoline? I'm trying to use words that it's not my first language,
Go
English.
ahead. What is the inner what?
Like the inner gasoline, what was the strength of the woman that even in that adversity, like we're going, can keep a
And even
different
what?
connection?
What was the fuel that made the woman,
Love of life. Love of life.
Okay.
Now, I want to say something. Yeah, maybe this has to do with what just happened. I don't know, but I want to say something. It's not only having children, which can be a reflection of love and life. Okay, I just want to make that clear because maybe you know there are always people who can't have children, and that's okay. You know, it's like there's other ways to reflect this affirmation and love of life. But the most graphic, just like there are other ways to describe passion than the way Ezekiel did. There are other ways to do it, but these are the most basal. No question, these are the most basal ones. But there are other ways to describe passion, and there are other ways to describe of love and affirmation of life, right? So, and there are other ways to live that affirmation of life. It can be with all kinds of kindnesses and loving kindness and creativity, etc., etc. I just want to make that clear. We're here studying the Haggadah. This isn't the last word on everything, but it's definitely clearly the Haggadah's uh, depiction of what it takes to get to Chayut, where it needs to begin. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And